Ken Kaneki, an ordinary boy who happened to be interested in the same book as a girl. However, little did he know, that same girl would change his life for the worse. When Ken decided to take her out on a date, it turned out he was actually the dessert. As Ken ponders with his new horrible life, he has to keep his identity hidden as well as keeping himself sane.
I say...
In the 20th ward, the Aqua building becomes the scene of a troubling incident when suspected ghouls are spotted. The CCG, known for handling ghoul-related matters, promptly dispatches its agents to confront the situation. Upon arriving, they find a female ghoul engrossed in a grisly feast on a pile of corpses. A masked man, tasked with capturing her, faces off with the fearless ghoul. However, her anger at having her meal interrupted leads to a tense confrontation. In her defiance, she seizes the masked man's pliers, leaving him infuriated as she escapes and discards the tool from a building's rooftop. Meanwhile, at a cafe, two friends, Ken Kaneki and Hideyoshi Nagachika, learn about the Aqua building incident from the news in the background. Hideyoshi teases Ken about his crush, leading him to approach the waitress, Toka Kirishima, to place his order. However, Hideyoshi's flirty behavior prompts Ken's disapproval. The atmosphere changes when Rise Kamishiro enters the cafe, catching Ken's attention. Hideyoshi dismisses Ken's chances with Rise and departs, leaving Ken to spend time reading a book. Surprisingly, Ken notices that Rise is also engrossed in the same book. Their eye contact suggests mutual interest, sparking excitement in Ken. He excitedly tells Hideyoshi about his upcoming date with Rise at a bookstore. While Hideyoshi is near the Aqua building with ghoul investigators Nakajima and Kusaba, Ken and Rise go on their date, discussing their favorite author. Ken observes that Rise eats sparingly and learns about her fears surrounding the recent ghoul-related crimes in the area. Promising to protect her, Ken opens up about his life during their walk home. However, the evening takes a dark turn when Rise reveals her ghoul nature by biting Ken and unleashing her deadly Kagyun. In a construction site showdown, Ken appears lifeless after Rise impales him. Before she can devour him, fate intervenes and Rise is crushed by falling steel beams. Ken wakes up in the hospital, unaware of the organ transplant he received from Rise. His left eye's red and black appearance goes unnoticed, but he experiences a loss of appetite, concerning his nurse and Dr. Kanu, who suspect a psychological issue. Leaving the hospital, Ken finds a note from Hyde but struggles to face him or anyone else, isolating himself. Still, Hyde remains resolute in helping his childhood friend. Overwhelmed by panic and a ravenous hunger for human flesh, Ken's emotional turmoil intensifies. He witnesses a ghoul eating a corpse and gets attacked by Nishiki Nishio. Toka intervenes, leading to a territorial dispute, and Nishiki flees. Struggling to control his cravings, Ken rejects Toka's offer of flesh and desperately clings to his humanity. Frustrated, Toka attempts to force-feed him, leaving Ken torn between his identity as a human and the ghoul urges within him. This ordeal marks the beginning of a transformative journey for Ken as he grapples with his newfound ghoul instincts and tries to retain his sense of self. Ken, now a ghoul, struggles to come to terms with his new nature and refuses to consume human flesh, finding it repulsive. This refusal angers Toka, who takes her frustration out on him physically. Their manager, Yoshimura, intervenes, reminding Toka of the purpose of their group. He invites Ken for coffee, explaining that it's one of the few things ghouls can consume besides humans, although it doesn't satisfy their hunger entirely. Yoshimura also provides Ken with a package of meat and offers more if needed. Back at home, Ken wrestles with the temptation to eat the meat given by Yoshimura. He sees an illusion of Rise, who taunts him to give in. However, when he receives a text from his best friend Hyde, he regains control and tosses the meat aside. The next day, Ken returns to school, where Hyde warmly greets him. Hyde introduces Ken to his upperclassman, who turns out to be Nishiki Nishio, the same ghoul who had threatened Ken before. Nishiki behaves as if he doesn't recognize Ken and invites Hyde to his home. Concerned for Hyde's safety, Ken insists on accompanying them, and surprisingly, Nishiki agrees. On their way to Nishiki's home, Ken is surprised to see that Nishiki can eat human food and blend into society seamlessly. However, things take a dark turn when Nishiki suddenly attacks both Hyde and Ken. During the fight, Nishiki injures Ken and then proceeds to vomit the human food he ate earlier onto the unconscious Hyde, taunting Ken and threatening to harm his friend even more. In a moment of desperation, Ken recalls the memories of their cherished friendship from childhood, finding the strength to summon his Kagyun for the first time. He manages to defeat Nishiki, but his hunger still overwhelms him. Amidst the turmoil, Ken is on the brink of succumbing to his cravings and attacking Hyde when Toka appears, attempting to reason with him. However, Ken's insatiable hunger leads to a fierce confrontation between them as she tries to prevent him from harming his friend. Later, Ken wakes up at Anteku, finding a taste of blood in his mouth. Yoshimura reveals that he was fed while unconscious to prevent him from harming Hyde further. Filled with guilt and anxiety, Ken feels isolated and lost. However, Yoshimura offers reassurance, assuring him that he can find a place in both the human and ghoul worlds. He extends an invitation for Ken to join Anteku, where he starts learning how to make coffee. Meanwhile, investigators Amon and Mato are diligently working on the cases involving the binge eater, and Jason, finding a crucial clue in the pliers that Rise had discarded. As Hyde wakes up, he carries a knowing smile on his face, hinting at secrets yet to unfold. In the 20th ward, tensions rise as dangerous ghouls and investigators clash. Dr. Asaki, attending to a patient, experiences terror when Jason, a menacing ghoul, demands new pliers. Meanwhile, Ken, now a waiter at Anteku and a ghoul himself, learns the art of coffee making from Yoshimura, the cafe's manager. Ken wonders about Yoshimura's affinity for humans, which remains a mystery to him. Unexpectedly, Hyde visits Anteku to thank Toka for her assistance after the accident, unaware of their true nature as ghouls. Toka warns Ken that if Hyde discovers the truth, she will take drastic measures. Ryako and Hinami Fuguchi, ghouls seeking help, also arrive, and Toka promptly aids them. However, she remains tight-lipped about their situation, leaving Ken curious. Toka cryptically asks Ken if Yoshimura has discussed the guys in suits with him. This refers to the CCG, where a meeting is held to discuss ghoul investigations. Amon and Mato are appointed to lead an investigation into the 20th ward, including Jason's actions and the pliers found during a previous encounter. The CCG's ultimate mission is to eliminate all ghouls in Tokyo. At Anteku, Yoshimura teaches Ken to eat human food, giving him sugar cubes to suppress his ghoul hunger. He then asks Ken to help gather food on Toka's behalf, a task that frightens Ken, but he agrees to assist. Ken learns that Anteku scavenges from suicide victims, a grim revelation. On another front, Mato and Amon roam the streets at night, capturing and interrogating ghouls about Jason's pliers. When one refuses to cooperate, Mato ruthlessly kills him. At Anteku, Yoshimura advises Ken to wear a mask for protection and takes him to a mask studio. Ken meets Yuta, an eccentric mask maker, and gets his own mask. Ken's curiosity about Hinami's situation persists, and he insists on helping her. Toka finally explains that Hinami had to separate from her father, leading to her changed behavior. Ken's mask serves as a disguise to protect his identity from investigators. At Anteku, Ken's attempt to talk to Hinami is awkward, but he brings her coffee and apologizes for the interruption. They bond over books, and Ken promises to teach her more about kanji. Meanwhile, a surviving ghoul from Mato and Amon's encounter speaks to a friend about the increasing danger in the 20th ward due to the growing number of investigators and dangerous ghouls. Hinami and her mother visit Anteku, and Hinami seems to be in better spirits. However, as they head upstairs, a mysterious man with a formidable presence arrives at the cafe, sparking intrigue and uncertainty among the staff, showing a keen interest in Ken. However, Ken finds Tsukiyama's behavior unsettling and uncomfortable. Toka, who works at the coffee shop, is annoyed by Tsukiyama's presence and eventually sends him away, though he promises to return. Toka warns Ken to stay away from Tsukiyama, hinting at something ominous about the man. Later, it is revealed that Tsukiyama consumes the eyes of virgins as a meal and seems to be intrigued by Ken's scent, suggesting an unsettling connection between the two. Meanwhile, Toka is seen having lunch with her best friend, Yuriko, at school. Yuriko is concerned about Toka's eating habits and convinces her to try some homemade food. Toka pretends to eat without any issues, but she struggles to keep the food down and feels weak. Back at Anteku, Tsukiyama pays Ken another visit, making him suspicious of the man's intentions. Tsukiyama notices Ken reading a book and invites him to a cafe where the rumored favorite author of the book is said to visit. He mentions being friends with Rise, which piques Ken's curiosity, and they agree to meet again. Reflecting on his encounter with Tsukiyama, Ken realizes that Tsukiyama might not be as bad as he initially thought. I said the same thing about my uncle, and look where that got me, in a basement. If I ever seen another Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter, that would definitely be this dude. Yoshimura, the owner of Anteku, allows Ken to take the day off and informs him that Yomo wants to meet him before he leaves. Yomo takes Ken to an underground area and begins training him in hand-to-hand combat. Following the training, Yomo takes Ken to a bar named Helter Skelter to meet the bar owner, Itori. Itori has heard a lot about Ken from Yomo and tests him by throwing a glass of blood in his face, triggering his ghoul eye to activate. Itori reveals information about one-eyed ghouls, beings born from both human and ghoul parents, whose existence is considered a myth due to the difficulty of ghoul-human pregnancies. At a subsequent meeting with Tsukiyama, they discuss Rise, with Tsukiyama sharing their previous conversation and a painful memory of being rejected by her when he invited her to join his gourmet club. He proposes taking Ken to one of Rise's favorite places. Ken goes to the special place only to be led into a trap by Tsukiyama's peculiar servants. They drug him with spiked coffee, causing him to lose control of his legs. Ken finds himself in a perilous situation, facing a crowd of ghouls, and Tsukiyama, now calling himself Mr. MM, reveals his plan to make Ken their meal for the night. As Ken struggles to escape, his ghoul eye activates, revealing his true identity as a one-eyed ghoul. Fueled by anger, he manages to break free from an attacker, but the spiked drugs weaken him further. Tsukiyama steps in to save Ken by impaling the attacker, offering Ken as a substitute for the menu. Tsukiyama becomes intrigued by Ken's status as a legendary one-eyed ghoul, and despite pretending it was all a joke, he sees Ken as a valuable treasure to possess. The encounter leaves Ken in a precarious and dangerous situation, entangled with Tsukiyama and the underground world of ghouls. After his intense battle with Taro, Ken wakes up from a nightmare, finding the 20th ward filled with increased ghoul investigator activity, making Anteku's customers nervous. Yoshimura advises Ken to visit Toka, who is sick and resting in the apartment upstairs. As Ken heads to see her, he notices the name Ayato Kirishima on the door, indicating that someone else is also staying there. Ryako, another ghoul, leaves the apartment, leaving Hinami under her care. While helping Hinami with her studies, Ken learns that Toka fell ill because she ate too much. Yuriko, Toka's friend, pays a surprise visit to bring her some food. However, when she sees Ken with Toka, she assumes they are romantically involved and leaves quickly, leaving the stew for them to share. Despite Ken's protests, Toka forces herself to eat the stew, revealing that Yuriko is an important person to her. Meanwhile, Tsukiyama becomes obsessed with what to do about Ken and goes through his extensive library for answers. Sniffing a bloodied handkerchief, he devises a plan. After training with Yomo, Ken encounters Nishiki being attacked by ghouls. Despite Nishiki's past actions towards Hyde and himself, Ken decides to save him. After a fierce fight, Ken helps Nishiki back to his apartment, where he meets Kimi. Initially suspicious of Ken, Kimi warms up to him when Nishiki reassures her. As Nishiki falls unconscious, Ken and Kimi have a conversation about their relationship, and she accepts Nishiki despite knowing he is a ghoul, as long as he doesn't harm those she cares about. Later, Kimi is kidnapped by Tsukiyama while buying coffee. Ken finds a rose and a note from Tsukiyama at Anteku, stating that he has taken Kimi and where to find them. Nishiki returns to Anteku despite his injuries, and they decide to rescue Kimi together. They follow Tsukiyama's instructions and reach a church, where a confrontation with Tsukiyama ensues. Tsukiyama plans to eat Ken, but he and Nishiki are disgusted by his selfishness. They fight him, but Tsukiyama's power proves overwhelming. Toka joins the fight, but Tsukiyama's regeneration abilities render her unable to fight alongside Ken. Tsukiyama manages to pierce Ken's abdomen, tasting his blood but restraining himself from fully consuming him. Tsukiyama then targets Kimi, causing Ken to worry. However, Nishiki remembers their past together, his difficult life as an orphan who had to eat the homeless to survive, and his motivation for seeking revenge before going to college. Kimi saved Nishiki during his darkest times, and he recalls how she offered her flesh to keep him alive. Despite their best efforts, Tsukiyama proves to be too powerful and injures them severely. Tsukiyama explains that ghouls require human flesh to use their powers properly, leading Ken to make a decision. He allows Toka to consume his flesh to increase her strength, leading to a fierce confrontation with Tsukiyama, who becomes enraged at losing control over them. Toka defends herself with her powers, making it clear that she will not submit to Tsukiyama's desires. After Toka gains the strength to fight Tsukiyama by consuming a part of Ken's flesh, a fierce battle ensues at the church. Tsukiyama is impressed by Toka's strong fight and plans to use her organs as a garnish. However, when he attempts to harm Kimi, Nishiki intervenes to protect her. This enrages Tsukiyama, and he repeatedly stabs Nishiki. While Tsukiyama is distracted, Toka deals a critical blow to him. Despite his attempts to reach Ken, Toka finishes Tsukiyama off. Nishiki unties Kimi, but Toka, still fueled by anger, considers killing her as she knows too much. Ken pleads with Toka to spare Kimi, but she remains conflicted and attacks. To everyone's surprise, Nishiki shields Kimi with his body, taking the hit for her. When Kimi's blindfold comes off, she sees Toka's beauty, which confuses Toka and makes her run away. After the intense incident at the church, Ken resumes his normal life at Anteku, where Hyde arrives early and is served by Nishiki, who is now working as a waiter. They share lighthearted banter and talk about Toka's absence from work since the church incident. Hinami and Ryako start arguing at the cafe, and Hinami leaves abruptly. Ken tries to talk to her, but his efforts are unsuccessful. Instead, he speaks with Ryako and learns that she wants to see her father. However, her father's shady past is catching up to him, and they have to remain separated for a while. Ryako tries to make amends with Hinami by apologizing and promising to buy her a present as a gesture of change. Meanwhile, Yamori pays a visit to Dr. Fugachi to retrieve his pliers and expresses his eagerness to use them on Rise. However, Dr. Fugachi asks Yamori not to return, leading to a sudden attack from Yamori. He sends Dr. Fuguchi crashing through a wall, and outside, Amon and Mato await. Yamori decides to take on Amon and Mato by himself, managing to hold them off for a while before losing interest and leaving. Despite not capturing Yamori, Mato believes they have gathered enough leads for another case related to the Fuguchi family. Ken visits Toka at Anteku, but she is still upset and unwilling to return to work. They discuss the recent fight between Hinami and her mother, and Ken realizes that the love between parents and children is the same, regardless of whether they are ghouls or humans. Ken mentions Nishiki and Kimi's relationship as an example of the potential for better understanding between ghouls and humans. However, Toka is uncertain about what Kaneki wants, and he apologizes for bringing up her relationship with Yuriko during the church incident. Ken understands that both he and Toka worry about the consequences if they are rejected by their human friends, Hyde and Yuriko. Ken then checks on Hinami in the meeting room, and they both hope that Toka will feel better soon. Hinami asks Ken about a new word, and he explains what a cloudburst is. Ryoko joins them and expresses gratitude to Ken for spending time with Hinami before he departs. As Ken walks through the rain-soaked streets, Nakajima and Kusaba are questioning people about some clothes in photographs. Hyde observes from a distance and comments on the weather. Hinami and Ryoko leave a bookstore in the rain, and Hinami excitedly talks about the words she learned from Ken. However, Ryoko senses some suspicious men and tries to avoid them, but they spot her. Hinami is confused by her mother's behavior but joyfully runs ahead when she smells her father's scent. Her mother urges her to run back to Anteku for safety. As Hinami runs through the rain, calling for help and dropping her new book, Ken notices her while walking through the same rainy streets. After Ken found Hinami alone on the street, they decided to search for her mother, Ryoko, together. In an alley, they stumbled upon Ryoko, cornered by investigators. Ryoko attempted to fight back, but she wasn't skilled at using her kagyun. One of the investigators, Mato, taunted and mocked her, even revealing a new weapon made from Ryoko's late husband. Before Ryoko could say her final words, Mato heartlessly killed her. Ken managed to calm Hinami and hide them both from the investigators, but he was deeply shocked by the tragic event. Later, Toka returned to Anteku and found the coffee shop closed, with everyone looking somber in a meeting room. Yoshimura informed her about Ryoko's death and discussed the possibility of relocating Hinami to a safer ward. Fueled by anger and grief, Toka sought revenge. But Yomo and Yoshimura disagreed with her approach. Frustrated with their refusal to retaliate, Toka stormed off. Ken blamed himself for Ryoko's death, but Yoshimura tried to comfort him. However, Ken found no solace in his words. During the night, Toka sat alone in her room, feeling upset and contemplating her mask. Ken, on the other hand, broke down in the shower, finding no comfort in Yoshimura's attempts to console him. Meanwhile, at the 20th Ward branch office, Mato and Amon discussed the recent activities of the gourmet and binge-eater ghouls. The investigators concluded that Jason's hideout wasn't in their ward, leaving them with little to do. After work, Amon, Ippei, and Nakajima had dinner together, during which Ippei made a thoughtless remark, leading Nakajima to scold him. On their way home, they were attacked by a girl wearing a rabbit mask, who turned out to be Toka. She killed Ippei, but Amon saved Nakajima and engaged in a fierce fight with Toka without using his usual weapon. Mato also joined the fight. Despite being injured, Toka managed to escape. Back at Anteku, Ken and Hinami heard a loud noise from the next room and discovered that Toka was injured. Yoshimura arrived and deduced that Toka had fought with investigators. He refused to provide her with medical assistance, feeling that she brought this situation upon herself. Feeling that Toka's life was her own responsibility if she chose to put herself in danger, she ran away. Although Ken wanted to go after her, Yoshimura stopped him, and Ken understood that there must be reasons behind his actions. Later, Ken found Toka outside and brought her a first aid kit. Initially, she tried to push him away, believing he wouldn't understand her struggles as an outsider. However, Ken insisted on helping her and listening to her feelings. As they talked, Ken began to empathize with Toka's pain and the loneliness of being a ghoul. He realized that since becoming a ghoul himself, he would feel sadness if someone he knew died. Ken asked Toka to let him assist and support her in any way he could. At the CCG, a service was held to honor Ippei's memory, and Amon was present. Afterward, Marut approached Amon and talked about a new mission he wanted him to join. Later, Nakajima and Amon had dinner together, with Nakajima feeling sad and lonely after losing Ippei. Amon comforted him and asked Nakajima to pay for their meal, which brought a smile to Nakajima's face. Toka and Ken ventured into a dark area, and Toka kept her reasons for being there a secret. She hinted that it was related to her desire to help, but didn't elaborate further. Meanwhile, Mato received a tip about a ghoul known as number 745 but suspected it could be a trap set by Rabbit, the dangerous ghoul he was eager to catch. At home, Amon contemplated the unfairness of ghouls taking lives and expressed his desire to make the world a better place. Lastly, Ken visited HYSY Art Mask Studio to acquire a special mask for dealing with ghouls and investigators. After discussing their strategy to deal with Rabbit and number 745, Amon and Mato decide to split up for their mission. Mato hints at having something special for the task ahead. At Anteku, Ken expresses his willingness to assist Toka, but she appears preoccupied and goes to check on Hinami. To their surprise, Hinami is missing as she follows a scent she detected. Ken and Toka search for Hinami separately, but their efforts are in vain. Eventually, they hear Hinami screaming, and Ken rushes toward her. Toka is seen running with Amon chasing after her. It is revealed that Amon has realized that Toka is the ghoul known as Rabbit due to her extraordinary speed. Ken intervenes and confronts Amon, donning his mask to prevent him from advancing further. They engage in a fierce fight, but Amon proves to be more powerful with his Quink weapon. Amon questions ghouls' harmful actions and the despair they cause, reflecting on the death of his friend and blaming ghouls for it. Ken is knocked back repeatedly during the confrontation and contemplates Amon's perspective, realizing the misunderstandings between ghouls and humans. He desires to make Amon comprehend the truth about both worlds, but Amon remains unreceptive. The intense battle takes a toll on Ken, and he eventually resorts to his ghoul instincts, biting Amon during the fight. However, Ken doesn't want to kill him and urges Amon to escape. Meanwhile, Toka finds Hinami near the waterway below the school, clutching a bag containing her mother's remains. Hinami is conflicted about whether ghouls should be allowed to live and yearns to be with her deceased mother. She becomes upset, and Toka comforts her. Unexpectedly, Mato arrives and recognizes Toka as Rabbit, taunting her for her failed trap. He questions Hinami about a gift he left for her, which incenses Toka. A fight ensues, and Toka showcases her Kagyun abilities, impressing Mato. However, he falls into one of Toka's traps, giving her an advantage. Mato threatens Toka and Hinami, revealing a new Quink made from Hinami's mother, Ryako. He corners Toka against a pillar, planning to turn her into a Quink as well. Hinami, distressed by Mato's manipulation of her parents' Kagyun, retaliates and injures him severely. Mato remains determined to kill her, excited about turning her into a Quink due to her unique heritage. However, Hinami cannot bring herself to seek revenge and continues to struggle emotionally. Despite her hesitation, Hinami manages to inflict severe injuries on Mato. In a critical moment, Toka instructs Hinami to finish Mato off, but Hinami is unable to do so due to her feelings of loneliness and sorrow over the loss of her parents. Mato persists in attacking, even in his weakened state. Toka intervenes to protect Hinami and kills Mato. As Mato dies, Toka removes a glove from his hand and discovers his wedding ring, realizing he was a family man. Elsewhere, Ken finds himself struggling with his Kagyun near the canal. Hunger and emotional turmoil cause him to lose control, and he accidentally stabs someone approaching him from behind. Yomo arrives to help Ken regain control, and he hands Ken a package.
You're not you when you're hungry. Snickers satisfies.
Together, they find Toka and Hinami and head back to Anteku. Hinami is feeling uncertain about her place in the world, but Ken reassures her that her mother, Ryako, wanted her to live. In the waterway, Amon discovers Mato's lifeless body. He closes Mato's eyes and screams in agony and grief over the loss of his mentor. In a flashback, Amon begins his work at the CCG and is introduced to his partner, Mato, by Arima. They collaborate on a case involving the Applehead Ghoul. The suspect, Kai, turns out to be an elderly woman, and Amon is taken aback by this revelation. They talk to Kai, and her medical records appear normal for a human. Amon is upset that Mato didn't disclose the information about the records, but Mato explains that they can easily be falsified and reassures Amon that everything is part of their plan. However, Amon feels his partner isn't taking the job seriously, and leaves the scene in anger. Later, when Amon encounters Kai struggling with her luggage, he offers to assist her. In private, Kai reveals her true identity as the Applehead Ghoul and attacks Amon. Fortunately, Mato arrives in time to save Amon from harm. Back in the present, Amon runs into Yukinori Shinohara while on his way to visit Mato's grave, and they agree to have a more in-depth conversation later. Meanwhile, the CCG is preparing for a mission in the 11th Ward and brings in Seidu Takazawa and Kusu Kauji to aid in the operation in the 20th Ward. Life at Anteku slowly returns to normal after the tragic events. Ken expresses his interest in learning more about Rise, so he seeks information from Itori. However, Itori can only tell him that Rise originated from the 11th Ward and suggests he investigate there. The following day, Ken informs his friend Hyde that someone stole from him on his way home, but he can't identify the thief. He doesn't seem too bothered by it. The news reports that the CCG is dispatching more investigators to the 20th Ward due to increased ghoul activity and trouble. Meanwhile, the staff at Anteku discuss their concerns about an aggressive ghoul organization that targets investigators. Ken seeks out Toka, and they engage in a heartfelt conversation about their families and personal emotions. On the other hand, Hyde, sitting alone and drinking coffee, overhears Yamori and Nico talking about Rise. He becomes aware of their involvement with her. At the same time, Kazuichi Banju and his group arrive in the 20th Ward, searching for Rise. Unbeknownst to them, Ayato is planning to join them on their mission. The situation in the 20th Ward grows more complex as various characters characters' paths intertwine in pursuit of their individual goals. The notorious and violent ghoul organization, Aogiri Tree, spreads fear and chaos throughout the different wards, making everyone cautious and on edge. The 11th ward faces a particularly intense attack, as ghouls band together to target and defeat CCG investigators, resulting in the complete destruction of the 11th ward branch office. At the 20th ward branch office, Marud anxiously awaits news about the 11th ward and is devastated to learn that there were no survivors in the attack. In response to this devastating news, an emergency meeting is held to discuss the situation, and the CCG plans a large-scale counterattack against Aogiri Tree. During the meeting, Juzu arrives late, causing a disruption. After the meeting, Amon and Shinohara spend time researching and strategizing for the upcoming mission. Amon is surprised that Marud allowed Juzu to participate in the operation, but Shinohara believes that Marud must see potential in the young investigator. Shinohara also mentions that Amon's quink was broken and suggests that he can use one of Mado's quinks as it was part of Mado's will. At Anteku, business is slow due to customers' fear of the investigators. When they finally receive customers, it turns out to be Banju and the gas masks, who are associated with the dangerous Aogiri group. Banju demands to speak with the manager, but as the manager is absent, he talks to Ken and Toka instead. Banju becomes angry when he smells Rai's scent on Ken and threatens him. In a moment of panic, Ken accidentally headbutts Banju, knocking him unconscious. When Banju regains consciousness, he explains the dire situation in the 11th ward and warns Rai to flee because Aogiri is after her. Ayato, Toka's brother, breaks into Anteku and starts attacking Banju. Toka intervenes and confronts her brother, leading to a heated argument between them. However, their dispute is interrupted when the ruthless Yamori and his associate, Nico, arrive on the scene. Yamori takes a keen interest in Ken, and proceeds to brutally beat him until he's rendered unconscious, intending to take him back to Aogiri. Toka attempts to stop them, but she is overpowered and defeated by Yamori. Fortunately, just in the nick of time, Yoshimura and Yomo return to Anteku and discover that Ken has been abducted. Realizing the severity of the situation, they immediately begin planning a rescue mission. Yoshimura gathers the staff of Anteku to discuss their plan, and unexpectedly, Tsukiyama appears, invited by Yoshimura to assist in the rescue mission to save Ken.
Heartbreak. No kidding.
The situation becomes even more precarious as the stage is set for a high-stakes confrontation with Aogiri Tree. In the 11th ward, the attention is solely focused on the menacing Aogiri Tree, and their actions send ripples of fear throughout the district. The CCG prepares to launch a full-scale attack on Aogiri Tree, aiming to quell their influence and eliminate the threat they pose. At the same time, Anteku is actively planning a daring rescue mission to save Ken, who is being held captive by Yamori, a sadistic member of Aogiri. The atmosphere is tense as Hyde watches the news, worried about the unfolding events. The CCG takes measures to protect civilians, moving them away from the dangerous zone where the clash between Aogiri Tree and the CCG is about to occur. Anteku seeks assistance from Tsukiyama and Yuta for their rescue operation. As the CCG initiates their attack on the 11th ward base, they encounter unexpected challenges posed by skilled sniper ghouls. Juzu takes matters into his own hands and uses Marud's motorcycle to swiftly eliminate the snipers and secure a way inside the base. However, they soon find themselves facing formidable Aogiri members, making their progress difficult. Simultaneously, Anteku capitalizes on the chaos, disguising themselves as Aogiri members to infiltrate the base. While Yoshimura, Hinami, and Kaya wait outside, the rest of the Anteku members venture into the dangerous territory, splitting up to search for Ken. During their infiltration, Tsukiyama, Yomo, and Yuta cross paths with Noro, a formidable and mysterious figure. Toka, on her own mission to find Ken, encounters Amon, but she manages to evade him when the Bin brothers intervene. Amon showcases his new weapon, Kira, as he fiercely fights back against his adversaries. Deep within the base, Ken is held captive in Yamori's sadistic hobby room. Subjected to torture and brief moments of rest for regeneration, Ken's suffering is intensified. Banju and his allies attempt to reach him, promising to save him from this nightmarish dream. As the CCG's strongest investigators continue their progression through the base, they reach the rooftop only to be taken aback by the absence of ghouls, which strikes them as peculiar. Suddenly, the terrifying one-eyed owl makes its appearance, catching them off guard and throwing their plans into disarray. Seeking advice from Marud, they decide to send a select group of elite investigators, fully aware that this decision might come at a significant cost. Back inside the base, Toka desperately searches for Ken but gets attacked by ghoul shards. Nishiki sacrifices himself to save her. In the midst of the turmoil, Ayato emerges, and a tense confrontation unfolds, further heightening the already intense and critical situation within the 11th ward base. As Ken endures the excruciating torture inflicted by Yamori, He begins to experience a series of haunting illusions, guided by a manifestation of Rise Kamishiro, the ghoul who initiated his transformation. These illusions take him back to his childhood, where memories of his mother's overwork and struggles resurface. After his father's death, Ken's mother shouldered the responsibility of raising him and supporting her older sister alone. However, the burden became overwhelming, and she tragically passed away, leaving Ken all alone. During this nightmarish ordeal, Ken finds solace in his close friend, Hyde, who becomes a pillar of support during these trying times. Hyde remains an essential figure in Ken's life and provides strength throughout his journey. Amidst the torture, Yamori employs a coping mechanism to prevent Ken from losing his sanity. He forces Ken to count backwards from 1000 by 7, an activity that consumes his thoughts, distracting him from the torment momentarily. Yamori reveals that Dr. Kanu's plan was to transform Ken into a ghoul, exploiting his newfound regenerative abilities to break him mentally and physically. The sadistic ghoul goes to cruel lengths, even forcing a centipede down Ken's ear, intensifying his anguish and suffering. As the torture continues, Ken's mental state deteriorates, leading him to experience illusions and psychological torment. Yamori further torments him by presenting his friends, Shu and Haru, in front of him, forcing him to make an agonizing choice. Overwhelmed and guilt-ridden, Ken offers himself as the sacrifice, but Yamori mercilessly kills both of his friends in a fit of rage. This immense guilt and trauma push Ken to the brink of despair, and he retreats into a deeply introspective mindset. He confronts his weaknesses, recognizing how his previous beliefs of enduring pain to protect others had caused suffering for his mother. Ken realizes that life often demands compromise and acknowledges that his perceived weakness may lead to unfortunate consequences for his loved ones. Haunted by the illusions and the weight of his choices, Ken undergoes a transformative realization. He fully accepts his identity as a ghoul and embraces the strength within him. This pivotal decision sparks a remarkable transformation in both his mind and body. Breaking free from his shackles, Ken unleashes a ferocious and vengeful onslaught on Yamori. The tables turn as he gains the upper hand, subjecting Yamori to the same torture techniques he once endured. With Yamori defenseless, Ken absorbs his Kagyun, further empowering himself with the strength of his adversary. That concludes the anime recap. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know down below and I'm out.